one aspect which I'm very passionate about is don't treat SBOM as a security solution. Now, the entire approach that we have is security team is asking development team to create a document which will be used to poke holes in them.
We always do that.
Why would I be interested in doing that?
What in your experience has been the part that SBOMs generally are not capturing today?
Now, on both sides, there are lots of elements which an SBOM cannot capture.
What's your opinion? Should they be private?
From open source library, I am not expecting too much. From a vendor where I am putting money in, I am expecting you to follow through. Now, the biggest controversy so far is SBOM is one level deep. Now, I am on the which will give industry a reason not to go for SBOM or sort of push back on SBOM, which is what industry actually wants.
I guess that's because we want to keep blasting pagers.
I didn't want to mention it, but that was the example.
Oh, okay. So close to our hearts. Welcome to Breakpoint. I'm your host, Neelu, and here we are decoding the bleeding edge of cybersecurity. We are here to challenge assumptions, explore breakthrough defense, and learn from some of the most innovative minds in the field. Enjoy, folks. Hi, and welcome everyone to this episode of Breakpoint. The topic for today is SBOMification, and our guest for today is very aptly Anant Srivastava. He's the chief researcher and founder at Cyfinoid Research Private Limited. He's more than 17 plus years of experience in the InfoSec industry. He's a speaker at many conferences, and he's also in the review board for many, including Black Hat and Nalcon. He's a community contributor and a mentor to many in the community. Welcome to Breakpoint, Anant.
Thanks for inviting me, Neelu.
So, this topic of SBOM has been there for quite a while now. Just for the listener, when it started, it was SBOM became a thing for us, which is software bill of material, became a reality for many of us in the security industry when there was a directive that came in from the US president in around 2021.
End of 2021.
Yeah, and that's where they mandated that the federal agencies require SBOMs for their software from all the vendors and suppliers that are there, not just to get a visibility into the ingredients of the software, but also to understand what vulnerabilities are there, what is the security posture, and avoid many supply chain attacks. So today, Anant, I wanted to know from you, we know that it does contain components that are there as a part of the software, the licensing, supplier details, and so on, and dependencies. What does it mean to you?
Alright, so this is where I kind of divert from the standard definition of SBOMs, where most of us are looking at SBOM as a solution to a security problem. SBOM's usage in solutioning of a security problem is a use case. SBOM itself is not a security solution. SBOM on its own is an inventory. Just like we have inventories of other things, it's an inventory for your softwares. And if we keep it at that, then the usage of it could be n number of things. One of them is we are taking that list of ingredients and we are matching it against known vulnerabilities to find out if any of our ingredient is vulnerable already. And then we are trying to fix it. That's an immediate use case that we are using.
Okay, so with respect to the details that are present in an SBOM, that many of us today, it's been 4 years now, and many of us in the industry are getting more matured. We are trying to actually build SBOMs and be able to see all that. When you look at it, what would you ask, for example, a client to look for? So what are the minimum set of components or information that should be there in an SBOM in case you have outside suppliers providing this software?
So there's a fun situation here. Initially, NTIA was an organization which came up with minimum elements in SBOM. And this year, CISA is trying to revisit that whole document and come up with a revised list of minimum elements. Now, minimum elements and the whole initiative, we have to understand the context here. Whatever NTIA did, whatever CISA is doing for the US government requirements. It is not for everyone, but they're defining what is it that at the minimum US government needs from all of their vendors. Now that also does not mean that within US government all entities will only require these minimum elements. Every entity on its own has a requirement which goes above and beyond the minimum elements. But minimum elements is something that they are recommending everyone should have. What are the minimum elements? There is the name of the provider. There is the name of who is building the SBOM. Because initially there was just one name. Then they realized, hey, I may not have my actual provider building the SBOM for me.
Exactly.
Someone else in the system might be building it. So who is building the SBOM? Who is the actual provider? So there are two fields now, two different fields. You need list of components. You need to have some sort of a checksum or a hashing mechanism which validates that yes, this version, this package name matches to this hash, so that you can validate it later. Now the biggest controversy so far is SBOM is one level deep. Now I am on the camp which says this is right, this is how it should be. The whole ecosystem should have every entity having its own SBOM, and if you as a consumer are looking at it, you should be able to download the SBOM that you have of the product, and then individual SBOMs of the dependencies from their native places. So you should be able to accumulate all of them at your end and build that whole sort of the spider web of SBOMs at your end. But keeping it one level only saves a lot of headaches, because otherwise you're going to get into too many rabbit holes, too many problems that will spiral in, which will give industry a reason not to go for SBOM or sort of push back on SBOM, which is what industry actually wants.
I think I understand your perspective. So one level deep is simple in terms of maintaining and capturing that information. But I wanted to bring up a perspective from the security team side, right? You remember we had an incident. It was like a global incident because we were all dealing with something like Log4j. It was a 0-day Log4j package vulnerability where this particular library, which is very, very popular, very commonly used, is there in many components, which then become a part of many software. Once we had the 0-day, we started to figure out where all it is, so that we can remediate. And this was, although a simple problem, it was very complex to actually even find out, because this was many levels deep as a transitive dependency, which is a dependency of dependencies, for many such components, right? So when we talk about real 0 days, real issues, real attacks that happen, it does happen in transitive dependencies. So as of today, given that so one level deep does work when we have everybody following this, but what happens when many of the entities in the industry are not really following it, and some of them are following it, so you do not have complete picture of these transitive dependencies.
So the way I look at it is, if I am charging you for the software, it is my responsibility to give you a correct picture. If you are using my creation for free, I am giving you whatever bare minimum I am required to give. So from the open source world, we should not expect them to go and figure out all the transitive dependencies and work out all of that. We should take whatever is available with them. If I'm buying a software from a company, if I'm using a SaaS product, if I'm buying a software from a company and they're doing an AMC for me, I expect them to give me a full picture. Now, it is the responsibility of this entity to give me the SBOM till that point, which includes all the transitive dependencies that they have. This entity should be taking the effort and giving it to me. That's kind of the way I look at things. So from open source library, I am not expecting too much. From a vendor where I am putting money in, I am expecting you to follow through. And
That
this is
makes
where,
sense.
yeah, this is where the compliance requirements, like if you remember now, SEBI has done compliance requirements, certain has brought in compliance, they will enforce things. So that's the hope.
Okay, so what in your opinion, I mean, you've seen SBOMs of many types, and of course for different tech stack, different languages, you'll have different kind of package managers and different libraries, and everybody has a different way of maintaining those. What in your experience has been the part that SBOMs generally are not capturing today? We know that there are many tools that have come up for it, and the kind of vendors that you're talking about who are selling products will use these tools. You think that there is a gap in this space where something is not being captured?
There are two aspects around it. One is the actual build process, or the act of writing code to getting a artifact created, and the other chain is from that artifact being created to that artifact being installed on your machine. Now, in both sides, there are lots of elements which an SBOM cannot capture. So if I start from the left hand side, a developer is writing the code. What are the tools that the developer has used? What are the extensions that were used inside their say Visual Studio Code or whatever IDE you were using? What were the extensions that were in use? Did you had a AI agent writing code for you? Did you had yourself doing the coding, but you were relying on, for a lack of better word, a sanctioned country or a product developed by one of the developers sitting in a sanctioned country? For some scenarios, that's an important information that I want, but I may not have. Let's say the artifact is created. You've created a package, and let me consider a very simple scenario where there's a web application. That web application depends on a MySQL server, and the application gets deployed. So you have a setup available with you. So there's, let's say, an installer available. You go into your Windows machine and you double click on an installer. The installer runs, configures everything for you, configures IIS for you, configures MySQL for you, sets up everything. Your SBOM has no idea which version of MySQL is getting installed. What are the settings inside IIS, which version of IIS is there. So the actual stack that you're using when the final production environment is there are missing ingredients inside it. And that cannot be captured by SBOM.
So, okay, I see. So you are saying that, okay, while we are looking at just the packages and the libraries, we're not looking at the bigger picture more holistically, like the entire ecosystem. And that actually also means that we are not looking at the supply chain the way we should be looking at. We are looking at very in a very reductionist approach of, okay, what is the code having, and then over and above it is not my problem.
Yep. See, the way, if you look at it, if you remove software from it, and if you just consider supply chain does not only talks about, hey, I've created a watch, so all the components inside the watch are my supply chain. The supply chain becomes the entire process of getting the first component out to the vendor, reseller, the final distributor, to the person who's selling us the device. All of them become part of the supply chain. So why are we not taking that same approach towards software supply chain? Because any of them can affect us.
I guess that's because we want to keep blasting pagers.
I didn't want to mention it, but that was the example.
Oh, okay. So close to our hearts. But yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly the reason why such attacks will be successful, because you're not looking at the entire supply chain. You're just looking at the pager. So, okay. So that's an interesting thing. I think somebody should take a note here and then come up with a bill of materials for the supply chain. Something like an SBOM, but supply chain bill of materials.
There's a funny scenario that I was recently sort of hypothesizing, and I have since met a few people who have actually seen this scenario happening, where your non-technical friends in the company have an idea. They approach the development team says 6 months, 12 months, whatever. They go use their credit card to buy Cursor's license or any of the code assistance licenses. go to Lovable, create a UI for it, go to Cursor, write the backend code for it. Then they ask
Absolutely.
Cursor, how do we deploy it? Cursor gives the instruction. They purchase those services, deploy it, and then they get a subdomain on those services. They contact someone from the documentation side or the other departments, get that link added into the documentation, and now their baby is live.
That's the future. That's so much the future.
And now you have not just AI helping out the code, you have shadow AI, shadow IT, shadow XYZ
Everything
in the ecosystem.
I mean, after having done all of this in the shadow, I'm not sure if they can actually pronounce it, in the way that we generally do projects. But I think jokes apart, a lot of this is going to be that way. And because we are not just talking about product companies that use open source libraries or dependencies, all of these have their own maintainers. They have individual users who would want, of course, ease in terms of contributing to these projects. And it is very difficult to distinguish between one work and another in that sense. So it is going to become a complex problem.
Yep.
All right. So talking of the complexity of SBOMs, there's another attribute to SBOMs, and that is that they are static, right? They are mostly point in time for a software. So the version will reflect at that point, the point of creation or the time of build, what exactly was the version of packages and the libraries that went into it. And what happens is over a period of time, they start getting stale, getting older, and then there are vulnerabilities that creep in these versions and so on and so forth. And all that information is also not there in the SBOM. This is just talking about, okay, this is the constituents of your software.
Yeah, so this is where people have kind of taken it on the face, not in the spirit. So on the face, it says when you deliver a service, you should provide SBOM. And then on the ground reality or in the spirit, what they were asking for was, when you give an artifact out, whatever is the static fingerprint of that artifact is what should be covered in the SBOM. If the static fingerprint changes, the SBOM should change accordingly. Which is why most of us who are talking about SBOMs, we ask people to create SBOMs at the build time. Or if you have an environment like, for example, a Python or an NPM kind of an ecosystem, not exactly NPM in this sense, but say Python or Ruby kind of environment, where gems or the modules can be independently updated. In that scenario, you should ideally freeze your requirements. So contrary to what everyone says, that always keep your dependencies updated and whatnot, ideally what you should have is, one, you should keep your dependencies updated, but that should be part of the process, not an ad hoc action that a developer or that a user has to take. So the developer has to provide new versions as and when an update is there, and with every new version there should be a corresponding SBOM to it. So the problem that is happening right now that I'm seeing is SBOM requirement is a vendor checklist. So the vendor onboarding team asks for an SBOM. The new version that then gets distributed or self updates, no one asks for an SBOM of that. And that is why the vendors are inclined to use it as a static document. I don't know if you have been lucky enough to see this. I have seen SBOMs in an Excel sheet also.
Okay. That was the only thing left.
So people have gone to the lengths of trying to ensure not provide anything more than what is required. And there's a funny story also around this. So I was working with CISAR Tiger Team groups around the different SBOMs and types and whatnot. And there is this one funny thing that came up. There are certain departments who have basically said that, hey, we want these elements in your document. Anything more than what we have asked, if you provide that, that is liable to a fine. And after having a discussion, I could realize how that can actually be a problem. It can be a problem. See, if I'm asking you to provide me 5 lines or 5 line items, and I don't have that kind of a requirement. I as a vendor can actually dump a 500-page document to you saying go figure it out. It's all inside.
Oh, that way. Okay.
So they don't want that hassle. They've very clearly said, hey, we are asking you for these elements, just give us these. That's it. Anything more, you're liable for a fine. So now it's not just that you have to have a document, you have to have a very specific document. So the vendor side of argument is, if I have to create separate documents for everyone, I might as well keep some sort of a static document which I can just distribute to everyone. What no one tries to work towards is automating this thing so that you have one master document and you have branches which are basically whatever minimum elements are needed for X, for Y, for Z, and they're just available there. But that's where the whole angle around SBOMs are not public documents. SBOM should be private within the control of a vendor comes into picture. That's another can of worms.
Although I wasn't thinking about it, I also heard about this thing, and I was thinking if there are real use cases for something like this, because in most of the cases I don't think so. But what's your opinion? Should they be private?
I can see a use case, and I see a reason why they don't need to be private. So the use case that I see is, if my software is running in mission critical environments for, let's say, half of the world. Now the problem for this, and I'll give you a contrasting example from medicinal field. Say an MRI machine. If an MRI machine has a flaw in it and a software update is required, the understanding that the software world has is, I will push a software update. It's up to the user to download that and install it, or click on a button to install the update, whatever framework is there. How it operates in medical world is, someone in a city will have to get a notification that you need to install this update. They would have to download that update on a pen drive. Then via whatever transport they can afford, they have to go, say, 50, 100 kilometers in some remote area where there is no internet available. Then they have to plug that in, hope that the update happens without any disturbance, and then the machine is going to continue working. Mostly this machine would not be internet connected. They would not have internet access anywhere around it, but the software update is required, so they have to go and install it. So on ground, it is not easy to install everything on a click of a button. So that's where the whole complexity around the products come into picture. Now, in that scenario, I do not want my SBOM documents to be public property for anyone to scrutinize, because I know my supply chain is in such a way that I can't actually, even if I want to update everything in one shot, I cannot update everything in one shot. So that's the private aspect. The public side of equation, the general arguments that I've heard is, they will know about my tech stack. And you and I both
That's
have
what I
worked
was
on the
coming
pen testing
to.
thing.
The intellectual property side seems to be a little more realistic. I think, given that there are many vendors for a specific service and product.
Let me ask a question to you, because you and I both have been on the defensive and the offensive side of things. Who do you think has a better visibility into tech stack, the one defending or the one attacking?
I would say attacking. And I think realistically, yes, attacking, because mostly because of the defense space being more complex, cluttered, heterogeneous, in many organizations. For that reason,
I always go back to that Halva Flex quote. Offensive problems are technical in nature. Defensive problems are political
in nature. Yes, they are.
The problem that is there for defense is that the reason they can't have that much of a visibility, there is a big ground that they have to cover. In every sphere, there is a rabbit hole that you have to deep dive in. But when I'm attacking, I'm only focused on getting something out of a very small system in the picture, so I can focus more. But the other side of the equation is, an attacker always will have better visibility or capability to get better visibility in the system. Now, leave aside everything else, even if you have a proprietary and a private SBOM, we've seen enough examples in last 2 years where the data can be leaked by bribing someone. So you don't even need to have any technical chops around it. Like, you work there, hey, here is $10,000, can you give me something? And a document can come out. So if that is possible, why try and safeguard that asset vis-a-vis giving defenders the capability to actually have that information available on their toes rather than trying to figure things out?
Yeah, and see, with all of this in defense, we must also understand that at the end of the day, the risk is actually higher given there are so many attacks happening, so many CVs, vulnerabilities that are out, and more to come. With all of that, do you really want to risk it just for, some packages that you have added in, or more from a technical standpoint? Because then you yourself have less visibility of what you have eventually, trying to safeguard it so much that you are not looking at the attack surface that it brings overall. Yeah. So I like to look at it that way, that it's more a liability to you than it may give you.
My initial discussions around this topic, private and public, used to be on the lines of, you're trying to hide it because you have something like a skeleton in your closet that you don't want people to see. And that also is there with a few firms, that they don't want people to see that we're using 8 years old stuff or 9-year-old stuff. And this is not out of imaginations. We've seen cloud service providers, like I think last year or last to last year, there was a bug in Microsoft Kubernetes environment where they were using 6 years old RunC in their live production environment, and they were not been patching it. So things like these do happen, but that used to be my initial focus of discussion. But since I've had a lot of discussion with people who are dealing with hardware plus software combo, and that has given me a perspective on why there might be a need for private or keeping it hidden. But I also see that, hey, depending on your ecosystem that you have, if you are a SaaS vendor or if you are someone who is just providing software which has auto updates and other things, it is better to empower the defender rather than hide things from them.
Yeah. But while we're talking about all of this, and even if it's visible, beyond a certain stage, so you start gathering this information from your development teams, and now think of an enterprise and you have a lot of this data. How do you derive real meaning out of it? Because it's one thing to have, maintain and get the SBOMs out of your product teams, for example, if your product teams or otherwise from your vendors, but then how do you make sense of it, given that since I was also talking about, even if it was at build time, for example, that they created the SBOMs, now you're looking at what do you do with that information, because you have to now think of again the vulnerabilities, and now we are going beyond the custom code vulnerabilities, and now we are entering this space where for some other software or even for your own products that you're building, you're thinking of deriving correlations from this and trying to prioritize, because you have to also prioritize the vulnerabilities. So how do you see, there have been some products in this space, and I've seen some work being presented in different conferences as well around VEX. What has been your experience on tools like VEX or other similar approaches? How do you think that, what is the right way to do it?
So VEX and VDR, I think, are good approaches in my opinion. And the reason behind it is they clearly distinguish between, hey, SBOM is inventory, and this is the augmentation that we're giving on top of SBOM, which helps you understand where things are. The problem with all of this is creating VEX is not a standardized process right now. So everyone is playing around with it. I think Cyclone DX is the forefront runner in that aspect. So they're trying to come up with the standard around it. How do you put it in a document? How do you map things? So they're working on that aspect. But VDR and VEX, where in one document, you're talking about vulnerabilities in your own code. And in the other document, you're talking about vulnerabilities that may affect you or not affect you, which are part of your third-party ecosystem. So if you've used a dependency, a CV came up on that dependency, are you affected or not, is one document. The other document talks about these are the bugs that have come up in my product. So this detail needs to be visible to you. So that ways I see a very good use case for both of them, and I am championing for them. Let's see if industry adapts it, because they then need to maintain and accept that the problem exists beyond the current version, and the older versions also have issues. So that's
Okay, so coming from the industry to the supply chain and back to the supply chain, bill of materials, one thing that we have been talking about in the past few years is, like just to evolve the whole idea of what we are talking about. We've been very focused on SBOMs, but we're looking at the ecosystem overall. So while we look at the ecosystem specifically with respect to the software asset, right? Because it's not just packages or dependencies, it's much more than that. So in terms of software asset inventory, what do you think should be our approach? This is something, again, there was a lot of stress when Log4j came in that, hey, we should have a software asset inventory where you should have the entire visibility of what all software, what all assets you have. Of course, there is SBOM, of course, there tech stack or whatever information you can get. So how do you approach that problem when you're trying to tackle this as an organization?
So I know of one organization where Log4j was not a major problem for them per se from a direct dependency point of view, because they had the sort of visibility in their entire stack. So for them it was as simple as select star from computers where application or file name is log4j star.jar. They got list of all the machines which had log4j.jar in it in one shape or the other. And then they were able to look at, okay, what can be done about it. And then the aspect about third parties in terms of SaaS vendors which were affected and all of that came into picture. But from their own environment, they were able to get this. And there are open source softwares around those. OS Query is one of the software which I highly recommend. And the example that I gave was from an organization which had an enterprise-wide OS Query deployment. So they were able to query the entire environment in one shot, like this file, how many machines, which location, they got the list.
So that's a wonderful tool. In fact, I think I may be wrong, but even Meta and other organizations use it. It's very effective.
OS Query is from Facebook.
Yeah. Like they use it in for this kind of work as well. Yeah.
So things like those give you the static visibility on what is going on. I am a fan of drawing conclusions from different sources. Like for example, one of my very early work in InfoSec domain was identifying malware traffic, or rather identifying malware installation by looking at web gateway logs. So in our company, we had web gateway, and at that time, DGA was very common, so domain generation algorithm would be there and random domain names would be created. So one of our marker was if a machine is sending DNS requests to a particular domain, say 1 million times in a day, that's not human. There is something going wrong. So you can trace back what that machine is, and most of the time there will be a malware installed there or a problem there. So drawing conclusions from the stuff that you already have. OS Query is one such tool. Most of the organizations have some sort of AV environments. So there are capabilities that are there. You just have to figure out what kind of logging mechanisms are available to you and what is the information that you can derive from those. So that is, again, like I keep saying with DevSecOps things, it is not that some organizations will have same performance and some would have other. Every organization would have different sort of exposure, different sort of response to any tooling that we provide. Even if it is the same set of tools that two organizations are using, there will be difference. I call it your mileage will most definitely vary.
Yeah, that's a good word to use. So since we've been talking about software asset inventory and looking at the larger picture, I was actually curious to know, and one of the reasons to actually have you here is to tap into your experience in this area. You have helped many clients to understand this and tackle this scenario, not just SBOMs, it could be software asset inventory, understanding application security as such. and in the entire landscape when it comes to web security and more, I think, as the technology is changing. So from that perspective, and primarily from the supply chain security side, do you have any experiences where it was either very interesting or funny or very unexpected for you when you went for implementation?
So there are two things that are now coming up very often: data localization and origin of contributor. Because of the whole world geopolitics that is there, and we've had examples in the open source world where there was a package which was modified, so if it runs in a certain country's IP space, it would delete all the files on your system. So that was an open source code. And very recently, one of the top open source projects, they banned a set of maintainers because they belonged to a country which was under sanctioned countries list in a certain country. So things of those natures are coming up. So now the problem that comes is, if you are dealing with governmental entities, you have to sort of double check and ensure that you're not having contributions in your environment from any of the entities which are in that sanctioned list. Now the fun part about all of this is the country of origin. How do you define the country of origin for a code? Now, on one side, it is very simple. Whosoever is writing that code, wherever they are sitting, that's their country of origin.
Yeah.
But that's not the ground reality. There might be n number of people contributing to a software, but wherever the software's governing structure is, and whatever country's rules they decide to follow, that becomes the country of origin for that particular software.
This is interesting.
For example, if let's say across the globe everyone is contributing to a software which is, the parent company is in China, they have to follow the Chinese regulations. Vis-a-vis, a company is sitting in Dubai, a company is sitting in India, a company is sitting in USA, they have to follow that local country's regulations.
Yeah.
Now there are export controls in picture, there is vulnerability disclosure, mandatory disclosure to government in picture, all of that comes into picture. So all of the people are starting to get curious about this. Where is my code getting in from? Is there a package that I'm using which is built by X country or someone from X country? Could that be a problem for me? Then the other side is, where is the data residing? So if the data is residing in the European region, GDPR gets applied on it. If the data is residing somewhere else, what other restrictions could be there? Could the local government put up an order and get access to that data? All that sort of hassles. And I think we've had a case very recently where a company was cutted off from a cloud service provider because they were dealing with a sanctioned entity, and while they were not doing business in the country where the sanction has happened, but because the cloud service provider resides in that country, they cutted off access of this particular entity in a cloud space which was not in the country where the sanctions were imposed. So it's a very complicated global thing.
It is quite complex. Even we have not even touched the technical angle.
There's a fun example that Jeff Moss gives. Bunch of time he has given this example, which is around organizations like Red Cross. They can't have conflicted parties in their vendor list.
Yes.
So if there's a war happening and you're helping one entity, you're a conflicted party.
Helping is not an option anymore.
So Red Cross cannot have their assets in Microsoft Cloud because Microsoft Cloud is a conflicted entity.
Because it's because of Microsoft Cloud being somewhere, or Red Cross working with some other party?
Cloud being used by a country which is in war with another country, and Red Cross provides services to both countries. So they can't have a scenario where, while they are providing humanitarian ground service to a country, their access gets restricted because the vendor that is providing access has some sort of motive around it. So that gets very convoluted around things.
And we are talking about very large entities. Now think of open source contribution which is coming from where not. This gets very, very complex. I think it's... Yeah, as it is, I'm sure it's very complex for the development. So the overall development landscape, because they are dealing with all of this, and they have to hence think of data residency. They have to hence think of what technology they use, and it's not very, so being now on the architecture side, we do make those decisions, and there are multiple considerations before doing that, because once you have a design, you have some components which you're trying to use. To change that, to migrate from there to anything else can be a world of difference and task and skill and resources and so on.
That's kind of one area where I'm trying to, so I'm coming back to SBOM side of equation, but one aspect which I'm very passionate about is don't treat SBOM as a security solution, because right now the entire approach that we have is security team is asking development team to create a document which will be used to poke holes in them.
We always do that.
Why would I be interested in doing that? But
of course,
if I have created a document which helps me as a developer, as a byproduct it helps the security team, I'm fine. But it's helping me, it's giving me value, it's giving me input that I can use. Now what those inputs could be, and this is again an open area where I'm still trying to explore. One of the areas that I see as sort of input is when I look at the SBOMs, not just from one program, but rather all of the organization, I get into a space where I might be able to derive conclusions in the zone of this one library is used by most of our product or all of our products, or this is a group of libraries which are useful for performing X task, let's say regular expression pattern matching. There are n number of libraries that we're using, all of them are doing regular expression pattern matching. Why don't we reduce this down to maybe 2 libraries or 3 libraries which are better controlled? And at times this is where security team can actually offer services instead of letting or asking developers to do all things on their own side. If the security team can build some of these basic library functions for them, which are audited, which are mandated, which are reviewed and are in the safe space, and give that whole battery pack to a developer at the start of the project. Okay, you have this whole set of libraries you can directly use. You don't have to import anything. It's there, it's available, and it's vetted. We are not going to question you about using any of these. But those are maintained by security team. Again, how do you derive? What do you need to create? What are the things that you need to take ownership of? These SBOMs can actually help you, the security team, to take ownership. From tech debt reduction side, if I can see what is consuming most of my time, what is causing a lot of problems to me, I can try and figure out what the solution is. Like for example, there is a NPM module which updates every day. Every day they have a new release.
Okay.
Is how I would put it. I asked a question on why you do this. They're like, hey, anytime someone submits a pull request, we feel it's a good feature, we make a release. We do not maintain older versions. We do not have the bandwidth to take care of the security issues of the older versions. So we always suggest everyone to just use the latest version. Now, if your project is using that, you need to be updating daily. And that needs to then go to your all customers on a daily basis. So if you have some sort of components of this nature, you may either want to take ownership of that package, create a version which is stable for you and you're using it, or find an alternative which is on the stable side of equation. Because I want the latest and the greatest, but I also want some peace of mind. So that's the stuff that you can derive from these documents. And actually
that's a very, very creative assessment of the situation, because so in many of the organizations that I've seen, it's a mature practice to have a centralized dependency management system where we can actually, through these insights and analysis that we have done in all of these SBOMs, come up with the right kind of packages, libraries, and help them. I'm sure there are more considerations than security, of course, performance, and a lot of other things are there, which along with the engineering teams coming up with this and having that from the get-go, where you can centralize not just safer libraries but also update them regularly and have the right versions for people to use. It's a great option, and in fact dependency management itself is a big area. Maybe we'll do another podcast some other time on it, which I'm also very passionate about. But it's definitely it will be great insight from a security standpoint to actually provide this in a more constructive fashion than just go and say that, hey, fix this and fix that, because these are all very point in time fixes otherwise.
Yep.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing all of this with us, Anant. We had a great discussion today. I'm looking forward to many more with you.
Thanks a lot, Neelu, for inviting me.
Okay. Thanks a lot for joining us, everyone. We will see you all in the next episode. Until then, bye-bye.